You know, we are honestly at the point now where I cannot stomach Prime Minister's question time. I was just watching and I had to turn off just from sheer anger alone. The willful ignorance of the Prime Minister is disgusting on every single goddamn level. It's brought to her attention because she can always pretend, assume she just doesn't know, busy off doing other things. But Corbyn raised very good points. Life expectancy in the UK has dropped. Infant mortality has risen. Also, we've seen the return of Victorian diseases. But the Prime Minister's response, Theresa May's response is, nah, it's not true. It's not true. These are numbers given out by the NHS. Life expectancy has dropped. Infant mortality rate has gone up. This is not something we can debate about. This is fact. And yet Theresa May is completely ignoring it because why the fuck not? She goes on saying that under her government, we've seen the biggest boom to the NHS. This is something that really, really irritates me. Just because it's the biggest boom doesn't mean you're funding them correctly. We have still seen the biggest cut to the NHS we've ever seen. For example, if you take home $1,500 a month, I know a lot of us don't, but let's pretend you do, whether you do or not. You take home $1,500. If I cut your wages by $1,000, and then every now and then I give you a boon of 600, you're still a lot worse off, but I've given you the biggest boon. This Prime Minister is a joke. She constantly comes out and lies. She was challenged on the rise of knife crime and its direct result of being police figures being cut. 21,000 police officers being cut. Now this doesn't just come from Jeremy Corbyn. This also came from her own Home Secretary, Sajid Javid. And yet she sat there shaking her head, denying reality. Remember a few months ago the UN released its report into poverty in the UK? The overwhelming response to that was denial. Now this keeps coming up on my Facebook feed. 14 members of Parliament sat down to actually discuss what was in the UN report. And in the UN report, it highlights part of the problem. The fact that politicians, that members of Parliament, some don't believe it, others just don't care. And that's exactly what we see with Theresa May. She just doesn't believe it. Or she doesn't care. Or option C, it's a bit of both. She doesn't believe it. She doesn't care to actually do any of the goddamn research. But it's not just the NHS. She came out and started insulting Scotland. Very Trumpian. Insult our allies. I realise the history we have with Scotland. I realise Scotland isn't happy. I realise Scotland always wants to flex its muscles and float out that thing of independence. But here's the thing. Scotland's still part of the United Kingdom. And just like every other ally we have, Theresa May seems to have this Trumpian need to insult them. But she called out Scotland, or the SNP, excuse me, for not focusing on anything, for not focusing on the matters the issues that really matter to local people, which is education. How fucking dare you? How fucking dare you even mention education when you and your Chancellor cut education over and over again? Within the first few months of 2019, this goddamn year, you took away more school meals from children from low-income families. Just before the budget came out, schools across the country said, look, we're really struggling. We haven't got enough money to keep open for 5 full days a week. We can't cope with this. And what was the Chancellor's response? What was Theresa May's response? To fucking cut education again, diverting more public money into private schools. Theresa May is a fucking liar. But again, just as my video yesterday with Charlie Elfrick and talking about the Conservatives in general, she's not one of a kind. She is the embodiment of the Conservative Party. Cut all public services. Cut all public funding. Take in more money, divert it towards private institutes, private companies, tax the working class and middle class even more, give the wealthiest people in the country the biggest breaks, keep doing austerity, keep forcing universal credits despite the overwhelming facts that it is a disgusting assault and has brought poverty where it was not fucking needed. That is the Conservative MO. Again, if you're in an area that's having local elections tomorrow, please don't just sit at home. I get it. I get people have work. I get people have busy lives. Find the time to vote. We can't keep going down the same road of Conservatives pushing us into the dirt while blaming people who aren't even in power. She wants to blame Jeremy Corbyn, but Jeremy Corbyn isn't Prime Minister. She wants to blame Labour. Labour haven't been in charge since 2010, and even then, in 2009, it was a Tory Labour. Fuck off, you liar. Please, everyone, if you're in an area that is voting tomorrow, get out and vote. Because if you don't vote, Conservatives keep their seats. And if Conservatives keep their seats, the NHS is gone. Public education, gone. Public services, gone. I mean, hell, there were 2 stories in the last 6 months alone of fire and rescue getting cut that I unfortunately couldn't get around to. But that's the Conservatives. The expense scandals over and over again. Now, I realise politicians are buying second homes on public money and selling them for private. That's not just a Conservative issue. But that was lapsed and allowed to happen under a Conservative watch with Conservative rules that encourage greed and dishonesty. We have to vote them out. There is no other alternative. Again, keeping the Conservatives in. Goodbye NHS. Goodbye public education. Goodbye human rights. And it's not just me saying it anymore. It's Amnesty International. People have to vote. Happy May Day.